The wooden chair made a little creaking sound as Keanu Reeves sat down. It was the kind of sound old furniture makes when someone gently settles into it. The table shook a bit because one of its legs was shorter than the others. Someone had tried to fix it by shoving a folded napkin under it, but it still wobbled. He was sitting way in the back of the restaurant, near a hallway where the workers carried trays and big tubs of dirty dishes. The floor tile near him was cracked, and a small buzzing light above the table kept flickering, on and off, on and off. It made shadows dance across the table like little ghosts playing. This wasn't a nice table. In fact, it was the worst table in the whole fancy place called Hell's Gold. The table was stuck behind a dusty old plant that didn't look very happy. It was squished in the corner, far away from the shiny kitchen and the beautiful bar that glowed like treasure. Instead of seeing delicious food being cooked or sparkling drinks being poured, Keanu could only see a big gray door that swung open and shut as waiters ran in and out, carrying piles of plates. Behind that door, dishes clanked and voices yelled food orders fast, like a race. But Keanu didn't complain. He didn't frown. He didn't look upset. He gently took off his jacket, folded it neatly, and placed it on the back of his chair. Then he looked around, quietly. He wasn't angry. He wasn't judging anyone. He was just watching, like someone enjoying the moment. His eyes saw everything: the crinkled corner of the menu, the soft music from a piano far away, the glow of candles bouncing off tall glasses at the fancy tables. It was kind of funny, really. People wearing shiny shoes and fancy dresses sat under twinkly lights and shiny chandeliers. And just 20 feet away, Keanu sat quietly in the shadows. Alone. Forgotten. A waitress named Lena came back to his table. She had long legs, sharp heels that clicked loudly on the floor, and her hair pulled back super tight. She wore bright red lipstick and a look on her face like she was always busy, even if she wasn't. She didn't really want to serve Keanu, and it showed. In one hand, she carried a clear pitcher of water. Her smile looked more like it was painted on than real. "Would you like still water or sparkling?" she asked in a voice that sounded more bored than kind. "Still is fine." "Thank you," Keanu replied politely. She poured the water fast and spilled some on the table. A few drops landed near his hands, but she didn't say sorry or wipe them up. She just leaned in a little, lowered her voice, and said, "Just so you know, we have a dress code here. People usually dress better." Keanu nodded kindly and said, "I'll remember that." He didn't look angry. He didn't even flinch. His voice stayed soft and calm, like the sound of leaves in the wind. Lena didn't smile back. She turned around, flicked her ponytail, and walked away fast, whispering under her breath, "Unbelievable." Across the room, a man and woman sat in the center, where everything looked perfect. The woman wore a long white dress that sparkled a little, almost like it was made of tiny pearls. She had been watching the way Lena treated Keanu. She leaned closer to the man beside her and whispered, "Isn't that Keanu Reeves?" The man squinted toward the back corner. "Can't be," he said. "Why would he be here, dressed like that?" While they wondered, Lena walked back toward the middle of the room where two very rich men were eating tiny, fancy snacks and laughing way too loudly. She filled their wine glasses with a smile, touched one man's napkin gently, and laughed at their jokes like she meant it, even if she didn't. Back in the corner, Keanu sat quietly. He had already ordered his food. He hadn't asked for anything wild or expensive. Just one special dish, the Royal Beef Wellington. It was the restaurant's famous meal. Beef that had been aged for 45 days and wrapped with mushrooms and puff pastry, something Chef Gordon Ramsay had spent years making perfect. Keanu didn't order it to impress anyone. He didn't even care about how famous it was. He wanted to try it because he liked food that was made with heart and care. But time kept ticking. Minutes turned into more minutes. And still, no food. Lena peeked toward the back once or twice. She saw him. Still sitting. Still waiting. Still calm. He didn't fidget. He didn't complain. He just sat there, tracing the edge of the menu slowly with his finger. Something about how still and quiet he was made her feel strange. She didn't know why it bothered her. Maybe it was because he wasn't playing by the rules of the place. He wasn't trying to be noticed. He wasn't trying to act rich or special. He just was. "He won't wait until the main course," Lena whispered to another waitress as she passed. "I bet he asks for the check when he sees the prices." But Keanu didn't ask for the check. He didn't leave. He didn't even look at his phone. He was just there. At the moment. Waiting. Not for attention, not for fame, but for something real. The dining room around him sparkled like a golden castle. Soft piano music played in the air. Glasses chimed. Forks and knives made tiny clinks as people enjoyed their five-star meals. It felt like a magic kingdom. And yet, at the very edge of all that magic, Keanu sat quietly. Still in the shadows. Still waiting. Lena came back, walking with purpose. Her heels made loud, sharp sounds with each step, like she wanted everyone to know she was important. She didn't look happy. Her face was stiff. Her smile was small. With a little flick of her wrist, she dropped a breadbasket on Keanu's table. It hit the table with a light thump, like a tiny slap. "Our sourdough is baked fresh every day," she said in a cool, proud voice. "Usually it's served with the tasting menu." She paused. Then she looked at his boots, her nose scrunching just a little. "But maybe that's not the kind of experience you're looking for." Keanu smiled gently. "It smells great. Thank you." His voice was still calm and kind. The kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Lena didn't know what to do with that. His calmness made her feel nervous, like maybe she was the one who didn't belong here, not him. She didn't say anything else. She turned sharply and walked away again, heading back to the shiny part of the restaurant. This time, she went straight to a couple who had their phones out. They were filming themselves smiling next to a lobster dish that had fire dancing on top. She leaned in, laughed loudly, and smiled big for the camera. She looked like someone else entirely. Behind her, the whispers began. "I really think that's Keanu Reeves," the woman in the pearl dress whispered again to her partner. "He's so quiet. But look at how he sits. Look at his eyes. That's him." The man shook his head slowly. "If it is, someone here's going to be in trouble." Meanwhile, Keanu looked at the menu again. Not in a rush. Not worried. He was actually reading it, thinking, learning. He wanted to know what each dish was about. Lena came back with her notepad, ready to write. She leaned forward, placing one hand on the table. "Have you decided, sir?" she asked in a voice that sounded a little too sweet. "Or would you like some help understanding the menu?" She didn't say it to be kind. She said it like she thought he couldn't read it or didn't belong here. She was still judging him. But Keanu just looked up at her with a soft smile. Keanu looked up from his menu and said, "I'd like the Royal Beef Wellington, please." Lena, the server, blinked and looked at him carefully. "That's one of our most expensive dishes," she said slowly, letting the words sink in. "It's $420, not including the sides or tip." She paused for a moment, hoping to see any sign of hesitation, any flicker of nervousness or discomfort. But Keanu remained calm and steady, nodding in approval. "Sounds excellent," he said simply. Lena stared at him a little longer than necessary, waiting for him to show some sign of being caught off guard, but there was nothing. He was calm, collected, and completely unfazed. She couldn't understand why he wasn't reacting like everyone else. After a moment, she said, voice still tight, "Okay, I'll put that in." But instead of doing what she said, she turned and walked away from the table. She made her way to a group of producers near the wine cellar, exchanging pleasantries, and then spent more time chatting while refilling drinks at the bar. As the minutes dragged on, Keanu's table remained untouched. No drinks. No appetizers. No attention. The chefs in the kitchen waited for Keanu's ticket to come through, but nothing happened. Lena was busy making small talk, ignoring the man at table 19. At her station, Lena leaned over to another server named Olivia, who had only been working there for 2 weeks. "These people always bluff," Lena whispered. "They order the most expensive thing on the menu and then walk out when the check comes. Watch. He'll be gone before the main course even arrives." Olivia wasn't so sure. She glanced at Keanu's table, where he sat quietly, still waiting. "But he's been waiting for over 20 minutes, Olivia said. "Shouldn't we check on him?" Lena rolled her eyes. "Oh, him? Let him wait. He's not a priority." She gave Olivia a cold look. "This is Gordon Ramsay's flagship restaurant. We're a brand, not a soup kitchen. He's just some guy who doesn't even know how to dress for a fancy restaurant." Meanwhile, an older man who had toasted Keanu earlier was watching the scene. His name was Charles Holloway, and he was a well-known food critic with decades of experience. He sat with perfect posture, hands folded neatly in his lap. His gaze followed Keanu, and he started to notice something strange. The man at table 19 wasn't angry, wasn't frustrated, wasn't reacting at all. He was calm, patient, and present. Charles couldn't help but feel that something was different about this man. He knew grace under pressure when he saw it, and there was something about Keanu that seemed special. "Interesting," Charles murmured to his companion, taking a sip of his wine. "This man didn't come here just to eat. He came here to teach." Back in the kitchen, the air was thick with the hustle and bustle of the staff. The sound of copper pans clattering together and the hiss of steam from the stovetops echoed throughout the room. Orders were shouted across the kitchen. Chefs rushed to plate the dishes, and truffle oil was drizzled with care. Tiny microgreens were placed on top of plates with delicate tweezers. It was a dance, a beautiful, chaotic symphony of sounds and smells, and it was all part of the job. The chefs were used to the rhythm of it. But tonight, something felt wrong. It wasn't the usual chaos. At table 19, Keanu was still waiting, and no one in the kitchen had received his order. Finally, after much time had passed, the appetizer arrived late. Lena brought it over, placing it down on the table with a thud and without making eye contact with Keanu. "You've had mushroom tartar before, right?" she asked in a voice that was less than friendly. Keanu looked up at her, still calm. "Yes, this looks wonderful. Thank you." Lena lingered for a moment, standing with her arms crossed, staring at him, waiting for him to flinch, for him to show some sign of irritation or anger. But Keanu just took his fork, cut a small piece of the dish, and tasted it. He closed his eyes briefly, savoring the flavor, before nodding to himself. "Lovely texture," he said. Lena's smile dropped. Her face grew tight, and she walked away in a huff, muttering under her breath, "He'll never make it to dessert." But deep inside, there was something else, a feeling she couldn't quite shake. The man in the back corner of the restaurant wasn't acting like a typical customer. He wasn't upset, wasn't asking for special treatment, and wasn't trying to rush anyone. His patience, his quiet dignity, unsettled her more than she expected. At the same time, whispers began to spread through the restaurant. More people were starting to notice Keanu. He was the center of attention now, not because he was doing anything loud or dramatic, but because he was doing nothing at all. He was calm. He was present. And that stillness was powerful. People began to realize that this wasn't just some random guest. Something about him felt different. Olivia, the young server, looked at Lena from across the room, still holding her order pad. He's still waiting on his entree, she said gently. It's been over half an hour now. Lena scoffed. Let him wait. It's not our problem. But he's been so respectful, Olivia insisted. He hasn't complained, hasn't raised his voice once. I think he's someone important. Lena shot her a sharp look. If you want to make it here, stop thinking like a server and start thinking like a brand, she said coldly. That table, that guy? He's no one. He's just a regular person, no one special. But across the room, Charles Holloway, the food critic, was paying very close attention. He was no longer pretending not to care. His eyes followed every move Lena made, watching how she treated Keanu, how she ignored him, how she made him wait. And Charles was taking mental notes. At a nearby table, a couple of food bloggers were talking quietly, leaning in to whisper about the scene. Is that Keanu Reeves? The woman asked. Why is he being treated like this? Her partner looked over at Keanu and replied, because Lena's too busy chasing clout to see who she's actually embarrassing. That's Keanu Reeves, and she's treating him like he's nobody. Meanwhile, Keanu, calm as ever, took a sip of water and glanced toward the kitchen. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated. He was just waiting, quietly. He wasn't playing any games. He was simply letting the situation unfold. In the kitchen, Gordon Ramsay himself stood at the pass, carefully plating dishes with precise movements. His eyes scanned the screen showing the incoming orders, but when he saw Keanu's order for the Wellington hadn't even been entered yet, he froze. His eyes narrowed. Who the bloody hell ordered the Wellington 40 minutes ago and it's still not in the kitchen? He barked. A nervous chef stammered. It's for table 19. The order hasn't been punched in yet, chef. Gordon's face darkened. Then where the hell is it? He demanded. No one answered right away, and the tension in the kitchen grew. Meanwhile, in the dining room, the atmosphere shifted. Something was changing. Keanu's patience and quiet dignity had started to have an effect. People were starting to realize something important. Keanu Reeves wasn't there for a meal. He was there to be seen, and now Gordon Ramsay had just seen him. The doors to the kitchen swung open with a loud whoosh. The room became very quiet, like when the lights go out. Conversation stopped right in the middle, forks stopped in the air, and even the pianist paused. Gordon Ramsay had entered the room, dressed in his white chef's coat with his sleeves rolled up. He didn't walk. He stormed into the room. The whole staff stiffened when he walked by. Waiters moved out of his way, just like the sea moves when it parts. Lena, who was at the wine station, froze with a bottle in her hand, her knuckles turning white from holding it too tightly. Keanu Reeves, who was sitting at table 19 near the service exit, looked up from his glass of water. He looked at Gordon Ramsay, and they both seemed to recognize each other. Keanu didn't smile, and neither did Gordon. Gordon walked across the room with long, determined steps. He didn't look at Lena or stop to explain anything. He went straight to Keanu's table and said in a calm voice, but one that everyone could hear, Mr. Reeves, I wasn't told you'd be eating here tonight. Everyone in the restaurant blinked in surprise. Mr. Reeves. Lena gasped. She turned around slowly, her face pale as she realized what had just happened. Keanu stood up from his chair, almost the same height as Gordon. His voice was soft and steady when he said, I didn't want to cause a scene. I just wanted a quiet dinner. Gordon nodded, his jaw tight. You didn't get one, he said. Lena stepped forward, her voice shaky. Chef Ramsay, I didn't know who he was. I thought he didn't belong here, she whispered. Gordon turned his head to look at her. His eyes were sharp, like a knife. What, Lena? Lena faltered. I thought he didn't belong here, she said again. Gordon's voice dropped low, almost like a growl. He's one of the people who helped reopen this place. He's one of our silent partners, Gordon explained. A gasp went through the restaurant. Lena took a step back, realizing she had made a huge mistake. He helped with Hell's Gold when the pandemic was at its worst, Gordon continued. He didn't ask for any recognition. He didn't want a seat at the front. He just said, let's build something that treats everyone the same. Lena's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know, she whispered. You didn't ask, Gordon said in a low voice. Keanu raised his hand calmly. Gordon, he said quietly, let's not shame her. Let's teach her. Gordon stared at Keanu for a moment, then sighed and exhaled slowly. Keanu turned to Lena. His voice was still gentle, but now a little firmer. I didn't come here to test you, but you tested yourself. And tonight, everyone saw who passed and who didn't. Lena's eyes welled up with tears. She couldn't breathe. The people in the restaurant were watching. They had stopped everything, like they were frozen in time. Now, the man in the corner wasn't just some guy. He was someone who had helped change everything. No one moved, and no one breathed. The warm golden light of the restaurant suddenly felt cold, like the lights on a stage after a bad performance. Lena couldn't look away from Gordon Ramsay. She also couldn't escape the steady, calm gaze of Keanu Reeves. Her hands trembled as she held her apron. She had spent the past hour treating the man who helped save this restaurant like he was nobody, and now everyone knew. Gordon folded his arms, his voice cold and short. Tell me, Lena, he said, what exactly did he do wrong? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her throat felt dry. I thought he didn't meet our standard, she whispered. Gordon raised an eyebrow. Our standard is service. Our standard is dignity. Our standard is giving every guest, every person who walks through that door, the same respect. You served ego, not excellence. Lena blinked back tears. Her mascara was starting to run down her face. I didn't know who he was, she said softly. Gordon leaned in closer. That's not the problem, he said. He pointed at Keanu without turning his head. The problem is you thought he was nobody. A quiet murmur spread through the restaurant, like a wave of shame washing over the floor. Lena felt her knees weaken. She looked at the exit, but Keanu stepped forward, his voice still calm but strong. I didn't come here to be treated differently, he said. I came here because I believed in what this restaurant stood for. I wanted to support something that Gordon built with integrity. Keanu looked at everyone in the room. Tonight wasn't about food, he said. It became a mirror. We saw what happens when someone is judged by how they look, not who they are. The crowd stayed silent. One person in the back whispered, Damn. Keanu continued, We saw how we treat others, and it wasn't good. But we can change. We can be better. At that moment, Charles Holloway, a famous critic, stood up. He raised his glass of wine and nodded to Keanu. Then, the diners started to clap. At first, it was quiet, but then the applause grew. They weren't just clapping for Keanu. They were clapping because of what had just been shown and what had been learned. Lena, red-eyed and shaking, lowered her head. Gordon Ramsay looked at her for a long time, then said, You're not fired, surprising everyone. But you're off the floor starting tomorrow. You'll learn this place from the dishwasher's pit, and you'll learn what service really means. She nodded, her lips trembling. Yes, chef. And just like that, the balance of the restaurant had changed. In the house that served fire and fame, it was humility that stole the show. The applause faded, but the feeling in the air stayed. It was heavier than silence, filled with reflection. People sat back down, but their postures had changed. They sat straighter, softer, and a bit more human. Keanu didn't sit back down. He stayed standing at his table near the kitchen doors. Now, it wasn't just any table. It was a place where a big change had happened. Keanu took a deep breath, not to calm himself, but to choose his words carefully. "I've been in a lot of rooms," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Rooms full of power, money, influence, and ego. But this, what happened here tonight, it matters more than any award or headline I've ever seen." The whole room was listening. Phones were set down. Eyeglasses were taken off. People were staring at him. Keanu continued, "Dignity isn't something you give only when it's easy. It's not just for the famous or the rich. It's for everyone. It's what we owe each other as people." He looked at Lena, who stood near the back wall, her apron crumpled in her hands. Her mascara was running. "You judged me," he said gently, "but you weren't the only one." Several people looked down at the floor, feeling guilty. "The truth is," Keanu said, "any of us could have spoken up earlier. Maybe some of us stayed silent because we didn't want to be wrong or uncomfortable or looked at like we didn't belong. But let me be clear. Everyone belongs where there is kindness." Gordon Ramsay stepped forward again, his arms folded. But now, his face was thoughtful, not angry. "I've shouted at a lot of people in my life," he said. Gordon said, with his usual bluntness, "but what Keanu just said hits harder than anything I've ever thrown." The people in the room chuckled softly, but it wasn't because it was funny, it was because what Keanu said was really true. Gordon looked at his team and said, "Let this night be something you remember, not as a failure, but as a turning point. Working in hospitality isn't just about serving food. It's about showing respect." Keanu gave Gordon a small nod to thank him. Then, he turned to Lena, who was still feeling upset. "There's a difference between being humbled and being humiliated," Keanu said. "What you felt tonight was the first one, and it's a gift if you let it teach you something." Lena swallowed and stepped forward, her voice quiet. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves. I really am." Keanu smiled at her gently and said, "Show it not just with words, but with how you treat the next person who walks through that door." Lena nodded, her eyes shining with both shame and a new understanding. In that moment, surrounded by fancy clothes and expensive names, the most important thing in the room was character. The lights in the restaurant dimmed a little as the last guests left. The air that had once been filled with gossip and luxury now had a deeper, quieter feeling. A lesson had been served, one that was raw and unforgettable. In the empty dining room, the staff gathered around Keanu and Gordon. There were no more fake smiles or perfect poses. Just people, some young, some old, some new to the job, and some who had been working there for years. Some were still wearing their aprons, others were nervously holding wine keys. Keanu stood by the same wobbly table where he had sat hours ago. He spoke softly. "This wasn't supposed to be a speech, but after tonight, I think it's fair to say something." He let the room feel the silence for a moment. "You all work in one of the most stressful places on earth. I understand that. But pressure doesn't give you the right to be rude or judgmental. The way we look on the outside isn't as important as how we care for others." The room was quiet, not because they were scared, but because they were thinking about what he said. Keanu continued, "You never know who walks through your door. You don't know their story, their pain, or what they've been through. But what you can control, what you can do, is make them feel welcome and cared for while they're here." A young worker, barely 16, shifted nervously but nodded. A girl named Olivia wiped a quiet tear from her face. Keanu looked over at Lena, who was standing at the back with her arms crossed, her eyes still a little red. "Tonight was hard," he said, "but pain teaches us things if we let it. Humility, being humble, is one of the most important skills in any job." Lena stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll earn it back," she said. "All of it." Gordon, who had been standing with his arms crossed but with a kinder look on his face, added, "She will. I've shouted at my chefs for making mistakes, but tonight was about teaching a lesson, and I needed it too." Keanu smiled. Kindness doesn't have to be loud, but it has to be consistent. He looked around the room one last time. You don't make a world-class restaurant just by serving fancy food or using gold leaf. You make it a world-class place by creating an environment where people feel seen, heard, and valued. If you get that part right, everything else will follow. Keanu paused for one last breath and then placed his hand gently on the table, the same table Lena had used earlier to make her point. Now, it was making its own point. This wasn't the worst seat in the house anymore. It was where the heart of the restaurant had been served. As Keanu walked out, his jacket casually thrown over one shoulder, Gordon turned to his team and said, "We're not just serving food. We're serving character." And in the quiet that followed, someone whispered what everyone was thinking. He didn't just change the room. He changed all of us. In a world where people care so much about how things look, tonight reminded everyone that true class isn't about what you wear. It's shown by your dignity, your grace, and how you treat others when no one is watching. Keanu didn't need a spotlight to lead. He led by setting an example. If you liked this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling adventures, mysteries, and unforgettable moments. Your support keeps these stories alive and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next video.